Hello, so this is my comparative study between Morocco and El Salvador. So, basic history and government, just to familiar ourselves with the country. So, Morocco is by the ocean. Northwest Africa has a population of over 36 million. It's been colonized by the Portuguese, Spanish, and French before gaining independence in 1956. Since then, the country has seen modest economic growth. In and it's the fifth largest economy in the continent. Under Hassan II's rule from 1961 to 1999, there was some political abuse with little regards for social and economic needs. In 2010 to 12, there were also huge protests demanding political reforms. But since then, the country has only been developing in a lot of the HDI single development indicators. So for El Salvador, it's the smallest country and most densely populated country in Central America, population of 6.8 million. The country always has and still struggles with gang violence, high poverty rates, and inequality. El Salvador endured coups, revolts, and a succession of authoritarian rulers in the 19th and 20th centuries. So these persistent socioeconomic inequality and civil unrest culminated in the devastating Salvadorian Civil War from 1979 to 1992. Hurricane Hitch in 1998 was also terrible for the country's crop production and consequently the economy. Since then, however, the country has seen stable democracy and persistent growth. So, for industry, um, the service sector accounts for just over half of Morocco's GDP, and industry made up of mining, construction, manufacturing, also things like tourism, telecoms, information, technology, and textile. Morocco is definitely a much richer country than El Salvador with more businesses and modern sources of incomes. El Salvador in the 20th century was 90% dependent on coffee export, but has since diversified its economy, opening up to trading and financial links. This was a very smart move to stray away from the natural resources curse. So the country is still very reliant on agricultural industry, and many of the country's workers are farmers who live off minimum wage. But the country's economy, however, is thriving, and one reason being it only has 7% unemployment rate, the lowest in all of Latin America. So, for HDIs, Morocco is ranked 123, while El Salvador is ranked 121. So it's a very small difference, but El Salvador does take the lead. However, if we look at GDP, uh, Morocco is ranked 58th and El Salvador is ranked 102nd. So this information is contrasting because Morocco is by far the richer country, which I'd expect it to have a higher HDI. However, El Salvador is placed 2 spots higher in HDI, but 44 places lower than Morocco for GDP. So of course it shows us that the statistics don't correlate. We also have to take in fact into account that Morocco is a much bigger country than El Salvador. So geographically, Morocco holds over 75% of the world's phosphate, and it's its larger exporter of some other natural resources. The countries are salt, fish, and copper. They make much money off natural parks and wildlife resorts. Geographically, the country is very well located compared to many countries in Africa. It's not landlocked, and it's right above the Sahara Desert, so it doesn't have to face the severity of the harsh sun that other countries in northern and central Africa have to. By ship, the country is also very close to Western Europe, which is very beneficial for commerce and tourism. So for El Salvador is a much smaller country, but it's also not landlocked. It has significant quantities of mineral resources, like gold and iron being the top exporters of the country. However, the main natural resource of El Salvador is its geothermal energy. So that's not a very common one to have, but the country is among the top 10 geothermal producers in the world, and it's estimated that the country produces 204 megawatts each year. Thanks to the country's tropical climate, they can also produce many crops on arable land, such as cotton, corn, and sugarcane. For single development indicators, which I believe is the best indicator to show us development, so let's just compare them side by side. So for poverty rate, Morocco has 54% of its rural population, and El Salvador has 29% of its whole population. GDP per capita, they're around the same. The physicians per thousand population, El Salvador is way higher with 1.5, but the WHO estimates that fewer than 2.3 physicians per thousand is insufficient to effectively cover the population, and both countries are way under that bar. Life expectancy is around the same, mean years of schooling is around the same. It shows basically until a high school education. And however, the adult literacy rate is much, much higher in El Salvador, but that can also be attributed to the fact that its population is much smaller. And as far as government corruption, so as I said in the beginning, for Morocco, under Hassan II's rule, which ended in 1999, there was quite a lot of political instability and corruption. However, crime is still a large issue in Morocco, especially in touristy areas. Little crimes like pickpockets, but also scam businesses, and theft. So a lot of protesters asked to free political prisoners that the state holds, and to readdress all these issues, um, all these crime-related issues that the country is facing. El Salvador, in terms of political development, it's accomplished a lot. Democracy and peace have been consolidated since the end of the Civil War in 1992, and 6 consecutive democratic leaders have taken place, and there's been a successful transition of power. So, final question, which is more developed? So, it's a bit hard to tell because if you look up the definition, it's advanced economically and socially, but I think Morocco is more economically developed, while El Salvador is more socially developed. So it's a little hard to tell. So yes, Morocco has big urban cities. The gap between the rich and poor is alarming compared to El Salvador, where the majority of the population live modest lives. So it shows that there are a lot of rich people in Morocco who live very wealthy lives. Morocco is also way more involved in commerce, trading, and international relationships, making them known globally. It's kind of like it puts them on the map. So this economic advantage can allow the country to take care of educational or health issues that it has. However, of course, that money has to be spent right, and that's only the government that can do that. El Salvador is much smaller and a more rural country, but their economy is stable enough to support themselves and export excess products like geothermal energy, coffee, and minerals. They don't have the economic gain Morocco does, that's for sure. But I do think that that El Salvador, is in fact more developed, not only because of the single development factors discussed right before, but also the natural resources they possess in a tropical climate perfect for agriculture. And since the Civil War, the country has quickly bounced off their feet, ensuring stable democratic leaders with peaceful transitions of power. Poverty, child mortality, gang-related violence has all gone down, while indicators like doctor per thousand, adult literacy rate, employment, access to clean water have all risen. Overall, El Salvador is just doing really well, and they're developing much faster than Morocco is. So that's why I think that we can't correlate GDP with HDI, and HDI isn't the only one we have to look at. But yeah, El Salvador is just, I think the population is safer, and that's what makes me think that they are more developed. Thank you.